He ends up getting this nickname that translates either into this dude wears a lot of vests or this dude is, a Rolling Stone and he's out on these streets. Like, it literally has both translations.
Okay.
This is a Main Hustle Media podcast.
Virtual Reality Studios. A new realm of creativity.
To Matcha, Masala, and
Murder.
So good.
I'll never know.
A weekly true crime podcast with your co-hosts. I am Rhia and this is
Sharmane Fury.
And we are just a couple of blended besties spilling the tea. And we have got a true crime caper for you today, which is coming from Sharmane. I don't know the story as usual. Those are our rules. I don't know what you're going to tell me. So all the reaction that you're getting from me will be totally natural. So when I'm going, and then what happened?
And then what? You did what?
That's basically how it goes. And before all of that, how is everybody? How are things going for everybody? I have got some chat for you because, as you know, we are in season 2 now. And each of these episodes, we're trying to adhere to those made up bullshit national appreciation days or national made up holidays. I don't even know what the real title is.
I don't know what it's called, specialty days or weird
novelty thing.
I like that we're trying to sandwich ourselves into some goofy shit to
it just seemed like a fun way for us to direct what we were going to talk about. So today is when this goes out, it will be International, not just national, International Mermaids Day.
I feel terrible that we wasted so much mermaid chat last week.
Yeah, we did a lot of werewolfery and a lot of folk tales and those kind of things. So we are this follows on though. If you enjoyed that, you might enjoy this. So, it's a good through line for you. And then after that, we might move away from mythical beings, perhaps.
Maybe just a smidge.
Yeah, because it's not really our brand, but we'll come back to it another time, I'm sure, because all roads somehow lead to fucking witches or something. So
right. And since I'm literally obsessed with mermaids and stuff like that too, it is appropriate that International Mermaid Day be celebrated.
You are about to be immortalized as a mermaid.
I am.
Please tell
I am.
us.
So this is actually one of my I've been clinging onto this, and it's a couple years in the making because this is a very long process. But for the audience there who may or may not be familiar, there was a TV show a couple years ago called Lovecraft Country, which aired on HBO, which was a sort of reimagining of Lovecraft's works, but make it Black, basically, which is appropriate because, he was a raging racist and misogynist and other things. He had a cat named the N-word. So he wasn't a great dude, but he created this world that, people really, he created like kind of what we were talking about last time, some of which made it into the episode, some of which didn't, of some of our favorite fantasy creators are actually kind of garbage people. And so people still ride for the work, but where you're finding racism or this or that or whatever in it, you try to figure out a way around it. And in this case, Jordan Peele's production company. Shit. Now I don't remember who directed. But they reimagined it in a way that centralized, Black folks in the 40s and 50s, and it was an amazing show. Yeah. In that show, there was an in-show comic book because the 13-year-old child in that thing was drawing a comic book about a super empowered woman in space type of thing.
Yeah.
That comic was drawn by Afua Richardson, who is one of my favorite comic book artists.
Yay.
And I want to tell this story because I want people to know they can just do shit. Like whatever the thing is you want to do, you can just probably do shit. Because at the time I was watching Lovecraft Country, I did not know Afua Richardson personally. But because I had a comic book podcast, pop culture podcast, and because I was in the process of opening a comic book shop in Houston, I was able, along with my business partner for the comic book shop, to finagle a friendship in which, like, we started out just interviewing her for the sake of our YouTube channel that was associated with our comic book shop. And then we hit it off so much that I think partway through the episode, I tell her, I'm like, I'm a little bit obsessed with you at this point. I think we're going to be best friends. You're not going to have a choice. You know, kind of like the way our relationship developed. It was just like, similar. Like I'm just collecting best friends all over the world. But there was just something about like the way she crafts her art. Plus she's a singer and things like that. And there was just something about her that I really enjoyed. And while we were doing that episode, she live drew us.
Oh, cool.
On the show. Yes. And I'm a person who loves to be drawn. I love to have my character, like me, turn into a character.
Like one of your French girls.
Draw me like one of your French girls. I love chibi Sharmane, so you'll see like I have logos that incorporate like a chibi version of me.
Yeah.
And I think it has to do with having an unusual name.
Yeah.
Because like if my name was, you know, John, I could get a keychain, a license plate ring. I can get all this custom stuff and it would exist, right?
Yeah.
Right. But when we have names like we have, we don't get to see our names unless we pay extra to customize it. And so I think an extension of that is I love getting my name on things. And I also love getting pictures of me as cartoon characters. So for me, that was everything. And then for my birthday, my business partner had bought me a level of Afua's Kickstarter for her comic book that she was working on called Aquarius Book of Mer, which is a telling of mermaids from all over the world. Cool. So also fucking sign me up. Like I'm already there. But the package that he bought for me for my birthday was to be featured as a background mermaid on a single page in the book. Which there's never been a gift greater. Like there's just like, it was such an amazing thing. And then on top of it, I've now met her and we've chit chatted. And so I was going to have to develop a communication with her anyway, because she was going to need photos of me and things like that to create my image. Well, flash forward 2 years later, we've now met in person because I saw her at Dragon Con in Atlanta in 2022. She's been on my other show, Blurred Comics. We've talked several times and things like that. And then in addition to that, while I was immediately going through, like literally the day after Tristan died, the day after we announced it to people, she was one of the first people to like check in and share with me because she had experienced something similar in the past with a fiance. And so in that respect, we've actually become a little bit closer. I haven't talked directly to her in a couple of months because she's been traveling, but before that, she had hit me up and said, hey, you know I said it was only going to be one page, but I think it makes sense to just kind of lace these background mermaids into other pages. And so she's like, you'll be on more than one page in
Mermaid rides again.
I'm gonna be a mermaid. So I'm so excited because like since I can't be a real life performative mermaid because I got the bad breathing problem
and buoyancy,
and buoyancy issue. Like I don't understand why I float so well. I'm gonna at least be a mermaid like in perpetuity once that book is out because it'll last longer than me. And so she's still working on it. She's had some like professional things happen that make it like she's got to go away from her book for a while or, and then also life happens and stuff like that. So, it's a labor of love too, because she doesn't want it to be casual. And in the meantime, she's done covers and art for Black Panther. She's won awards for her work. She's done a Wonder Woman and all kinds of things. And also, if you enjoyed Across the Spider-Verse, the most recent Spider movie, Spider-Punk, aka Hobie. That's her design.
No way. Oh my god.
Yes.
Oh my so my son is obsessed, and Across the Spider-Verse is his favorite thing of all time. Like
Mm,
when
so
that
good.
he's like, he went to the cinema to see it like multiple times. He watches it like once a week. It's just his favorite fucking thing, and he's obsessed. So I can't wait to tell him that. That's exciting.
Yeah. So now he has, I guess that'd be, you're 1 degree, I'm 2 degrees. He's 3 degrees from Afua Richardson, who designed that specific art of Hobie is her design.
Amazing. Okay,
Yeah.
so let's put details and good links to her to spread her
I will.
and give her some props. And when we have the physical mermaid
Yes.
illustrations, I can't wait to see. I can't wait.
And
So,
if you think I will
coming
not
soon.
blow up the image and have it on my wall as big as possible,
yeah.
I'm 100% doing that.
Do you know what I really want? Do you know, this is just so random. This came into my head. Like, you know, like a glass shower screen or a shower door. Like,
Mhm.
I want it like full size, like mum in the shower.
That would be so amazing.
I don't know why I just thought of that. I'm so sorry. That's the
So,
way
you
my
know-
brain works. But
You know how like Regency houses, and I mean, I guess multiple eras, but for some reason I'm tagging it to Regency era. The gallery walls where it's like all the ancestral paintings and so, and they're like different sizes. I've always wanted to do that, and this is, I promise this is not narcissism. It's legit. Like, I think it would be the funniest thing in the world to see people's reaction to this. Is I want a wall like that just has a whole bunch of paintings or pictures of me, but in different art styles.
so good. So good.
I think it would be hilarious because like it's one thing to have like one big picture of yourself, which honestly, I don't understand why people don't have more pictures of themselves in their house, because like it's your why wouldn't you be more important?
Yeah.
But like if I could legit have one gallery wall that was like Sharmane and Andy Warhol style, Sharmane as a mermaid from Afua. You know, like if I could have all these different like painting styles of Van Gogh version, you know, like everything on this wall, and then people just like not mention it and wait to see how people respond to.
People are looking
you
and
really
they're like,
like yourself.
They're like, oh, that's also you. I'm like, oh look, there's another picture of you.
Oh man, it's been a fantasy of mine forever to do something like that. I think that would be so funny. But anyways, so yeah, mermaid.
Okay, so coming soon, we will, hopefully be able to share that. That's so exciting. Before I get into a little mermaid, have we got any mug chat today? Where are we? You're packing, so I'm
packing. So all of my mugs are now packed.
Yeah.
The only one I'm bringing back the Spanish, the one that came with my house.
Oh,
I think you say that says "Gracias por tu amistad." Thank you for your friendship. Yeah.
So nice.
Oh, I didn't do that. That thumbs up filter is so random.
I know we still haven't figured out how it sometimes comes up. Look, I'm even doing it and it's not
right, because I've thumbs upped and it hasn't done it, but I've like sideways thumbs up and it has come up before. So I do not understand this filter that keeps popping up or where it's at. Is it on my computer? Is it on the robots that I'm using?
They will rise. They will rise
through thumbs up.
This is how it starts.
The thumbs ups. Yeah.
I am working with. I've got a big guy, and this it actually says in the handle. It says best mug. I don't know if you can even see that.
I love it.
It's just like it's self-proclaimed. I'm the fucking best mug you got. Like it's just written.
I respect it. As the person who wants a gallery wall of just paintings of herself, I respect it.
I'm the best mug you own, bitch. This is really, really, really old, and I actually forgot I had this mug. And when I did the infamous seasonal mug changeover with the Christmas, I found this at the back of the cupboard, and I was like, "Oh, you've been neglected. You obviously didn't get pulled out last year." So
how is the best mug?
I
so
know, right?
Neglected?
And it's sitting there, and it's like, I even told you I was the best one. And you just
told you.
Just believe me. So
believe mugs.
Believe in your mugs, people. They know what they're talking about. So, best mug is back, and I'm very sorry for the time we've spent apart, but we're reunited again. So, that's my mug, chat.
Nice.
Right, and from there, I'm going to smoothly transition back to mermaids.
Excellent.
Are you ready? So, since we couldn't find a murder that was related to the mermaids,
Man, I
the
tried,
mermaids
people.
weren't murdering
I
people.
tried
People weren't
so
murdering
bad.
mermaids. So this is why I thought we'll just bust through mermaids. Where do they come from? Where do they go? Good or evil? Fact or fiction?
I'm in it.
Okay, let me just go through. Right, 4,000 years ago, the Babylonians had a god who was named, I've no idea how to pronounce this. The spelling is Ea, so Ea, I guess, maybe Ea. And this god was half man, half fish. And it's because of that he was associated with the water. And he was therefore the god of cleaning. Because I guess somebody has to be the god of cleaning. I mean, it's not quite as good as some of the other titles, but you know. And so that is probably one of the earliest tales of a kind of man-fish hybrid, human-fish hybrid. And that actually probably developed into Poseidon and Neptune and, you know, the big guys with the trident that we've come to know and love. But then female versions, the earliest kind of recorded thing that people can find is from Syria. And there was a goddess called, again, sorry for the pronunciation, Atargatis. Okay. And this was the first, what we come to think of a mermaid, you know, the tail of a fish, the top half of a woman. And she was the goddess of fertility. And there's actually a coin that I will put a picture up of, which has got a really, really ancient coin, which depicts this goddess on it in her mermaidy form. And they made a massive, massive temple to her. She was very, very important. And it had this special pond with all these sacred fish in it. And people would go and pray. But I don't think you were allowed to throw coins in because you might hit the fish. So maybe not a wishing.
Or poison them with like whatever
lead
oxidization, stuff like that.
So then through Roman stories and stuff, and a lot of Roman writings, there's loads of stories of like a bunch of mermaids washing up on shore somewhere and getting up to mischief. And Pliny talked about seamen who would climb on board the ships and try and take them down.
13-year-old boy just giggled in my head.
Yes, thank you.
Apologies.
When I wrote the notes, I wrote seaman and then I wrote giggle.
Excellent.
So this is kind of when they started to get a bad reputation, though, because they were doing bad things to ships and hurting sailors. And then there was obviously the whole siren song thing, that the sirens, they wailed their song and lured the men. It was all bad stuff. So by the Middle Ages, everybody knew about mermaids. They were pretty firmly entrenched in folklore and mythology of pretty much most peoples, nationalities, countries. Especially
like almost every culture has their mer person.
Exactly. There's so many different versions. So this is my little aside, but this is my favorite bit. Until the Age of Enlightenment, it was widely believed that every creature that lived on land had a counterpart in the sea. So that's why you get a sea horse. So you've got a land horse and a seahorse.
Okay.
And they believe literally. And then there was also the heavens. There would be a counterpart in heaven. So you've got a horse that's just a horse. Then you've got a seahorse, and then you've got like a Pegasus, a flying horse, up in the heavens.
Oh, okay.
So this is what the beliefs were, which I think is kind of crazy. So
could you imagine like an airborne elephant or something like that? That would be a little bit terrifying.
So basically, there were some really like heavy intellectual, heavyweight type thinkers of the time who were really set on this theory. This was like, absolutely, we've got it covered now. We've got it fixed. We've figured out how the world works, and this is definitely it. So these guys included Pliny the Elder and my favorite named Saint Augustine of Hippo, which is his actual name. And then some dude who's boringly named Sir Thomas Browne. So sorry about him. I don't know who he is. I'm sure he was nice, but he had a boring name. So,
can't relate.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, he's not one of us. He's not in our gang. Augustine of Hippo, he's in the fucking gang, right?
Yeah.
So, and then blah, 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 some shit in the Bible, but that's not really what we do here. So I'll skip over that.
Hilarious.
So but it turns out that there were Christians, pagans, Muslims, everybody believed in this kind of counterpart system to some degree. And it would be proved wrong after people, got science and learned shit. But it's kind of fun to think that at some point they thought the mermaid was the human equivalent in the water. And that's what a mermaid was. And so the best thing, I'm going to put pictures, because at some point in the mid-16th century, this French guy, what was his name? Guillaume Rondelet, supposedly managed to get his hands on 2 specimens of marine creature, fish things, that bore a striking resemblance to bishops and monks. And he was convinced that not only were there like human counterparts in the sea, but there were actually counterparts for every job. So there would be like a fish doctor and a fish judge and like all these, and there were fish monks and fish bishops. And it was described, I've got a nice quote for you, as the sea monk was described as: the face was human but coarse and clownish, the head smooth and without hair. A sort of hood resembling that of a monk covered the shoulders, while its lower parts ended in a spreading tail. And the bishop fish was yet more wonderful, being clad by nature in the garb of a bishop. So, once he had acquired the fucking sea bishop, he took it to the king of Poland, and it was decreed that it could be taken back to the ocean and set free. But it was already dead because it hadn't been in the water for months, because they took it to Poland.
Holding it around in a
so that is
water.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like you come home from the fair with a bag of a goldfish, and he's like, I've got a bishop fish. Anyway, they threw him back in the sea, and no one else ever found a bishop or a monk fish. A monk fish, but no bishop fish. So that was my favorite bit of the fucking human mermaid story. And then there's obviously in the John Smith and Pocahontas story, they apparently found one in Newfoundland, and the quote from their documents was, "Her long green hair imparted to her an original character that was by no means unattractive." So, I mean, I'm not going to
humans to try to figure out how to fuck anything, man.
I'm not going to go out and say she was actually hot, but she wasn't unattractive with the green hair. So.
If it's less call and I haven't found someone yet,
Right. That's John Smith, though, isn't it? That's John Smith for you. And then there was also, I don't know, Christopher Columbus saw a mermaid.
Oh yeah, that's kind of my favorite human version of this, because I'm sorry to the manatees, but I'm.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, they did some things.
Exactly. Yeah. So that's very sad. So
am I saying that right? Manatees?
Manatees. The sea cows, manatees.
Sea cows, yeah.
And there in fact are 3 different species, I think, that come under the same group. And there's the manatee, which is the one we're used to, and then there's 2 other ones that one of them died out and one of them is only in some places now. And they got screwed over big time. By being literally mermaids. Yeah. So that was kind of nasty. And then the last mermaid thing I've got for you is that the original story of The Little Mermaid by Hans Christian Andersen in 1837 is not the lovely Disney story that we have come to know and love. Because just like the Brothers Grimm tales we were talking about last week, this shit was fucking nasty and scary, and it got real. So the very quick version, the sea witch, so that, it's all kind of basically the same-ish story. The sea witch doesn't just take her voice, she rips out her tongue, which is nice. And she gives her this potion that if she drinks it, she'll get legs, but it'll feel constantly like she's being stabbed with knives, and her feet will constantly bleed, but she'll be able to dance really well, and that should entice the prince. And
because who doesn't want to dance with someone who's just spewing blood on the floor all over the place? Yeah.
But apparently he did like the dancing in the story. So I don't know. So if she can marry the prince, she will get a soul and become human forever. But if he marries someone else, she will instantly drop dead and turn into sea foam. So he does marry someone else, at which point she climbs up onto the ship, and then her sisters arrive, and they've made another deal with the sea witch, and they've got this magic dagger. And if she uses the magic dagger to kill the prince and spills his blood on her feet, then she will get a soul and stay human forever. But she has to kill him. But she's in love with him, so she doesn't want to do that. So she gets the dagger and she jumps into the sea. But as she's jumping from the ship, she doesn't turn into sea foam and die instantly. She somehow gets resurrected. And then we have this whole fucking Jesus parable thing of her, and she's gone in heaven, and then there are other people there that she hasn't seen for a while. And that's where he lost me, really. I was better off with the cutting out the tongue and the blood and all of that. But the minute she went to heaven, I was out.
Okay.
So that's basically how that story ended.
And it was gay.
Oh, hella gay. Good
Hella
point.
gay, because
Yeah.
Hans
Yee.
was a homosexual, and he needed to tell the tale of the person that he loved that rejected him. So
Exactly. So that is the true background to so many of our best stories. And imagine how good they would have been if they were just straight up gay at the time. That would have
you know
been,
what I'm saying? Like,
yeah.
so many cultures got to be gay till white people got on boats. And like I was watching a clip of oh gosh, now I forget the name of the movie, but the guy who plays the Indian Spider-Man, who
yeah.
voices him,
Yeah.
his partner wrote and directed a movie about for whatever reason it has a white partner instead of
Yeah.
them, but it's basically like their love story, and it ends in an Indian gay wedding or whatever. So and now I forget the name of the movie. I literally just heard about it yesterday. But they were talking about like how in Hindu, like Hindu was hella gay before, like, you know, the story they allowed for different sexualities and things like that back before white people got on boats, and then and now like the way people of color,
historically in India there are 3 genders, right?
Right.
And there are still people who exist and live their life in a just a happy situation where they're a blend. They're either they're gender neutral, or, you know, they have different labels for it over there, so it's not really point, and there's no real point in translating it. But you know, this is an established culture. It's well established. If you look at a lot of Polynesian countries, they have accepted a third gender. A lot of Native American history has third genders, and as well in like the well, where you are now, there's, you know, and in a lot of the states there, the countries there, they're just everywhere has all these stories of when it was just totally fine to be, you know, gender neutral, queer, in between, whatever you want to call it.
And different levels of love styles and raising children styles in villages versus couples and all kinds of stuff. So it's just like, like how much better would some of our stories have been if we allowed them to be what, you know, what they're really about, and not necessarily having to kind of slide it in like, oh, this is
definitely
a thing. I mean, that's why, you know, Mixed Maine ends up being obsessed with the X-Men, because the X-Men was like the only representation of being, you know, some kind of a hybrid or some kind of a you know, different person.
I'll take the mutant label, because, you know, that's all I've got to associate with.
You're right. Like, I'd rather be, I guess, a comic book mutant than a mongrel or a mudblood or whatever, you know, like all that kind of stuff.
I am really annoyed because I'm not supposed to support Marvel right now, but the X-Men 97 has come out, and like that's my jam, and that's where I live, and that theme tune is just like my whole childhood and everything, and that really hurts. That sucks. That's a tricky one for me right now.
It is tough.
I'm going to choose love, as the jumper says. I'm going to choose love. This is a great charity that helps refugees. We'll put a link. Just go and check out their work. They do absolutely amazing work. So I just wanted to give them a big shout out. Yeah, because they're better than fucking Marvel.
I mean, I hate that feeling like now, like everything I love is some way of untouchable, you know, in some way, shape, or form. And you know, it's kind of like do the best you can, because literally everything is tied in some way, shape, or form to something problematic. And you know, I don't know how it would have been if I was still an owner of a co-owner of a comic book shop right now. It would have been a bit of a struggle, but it has derailed like my show because I don't know how to talk about stuff like that right now. So
but we'll choose love instead, and we'll choose to spread love. So shall we take that opportunity to get into it?
Jump into the story. All right, let's do it. She's ready. Shall I be mother? I shall be madre today because I'm taking it to Mexico. Because this is my last recording while still living in Mexico. I decided to go ahead and take it to Mexico.
Tribute. Love it.
This is not a friendship tale, though. this is not a tale of amistad in any way, shape, or form.
Okay.
But it is the tale of the very first documented, very specific documented serial killer in Mexico.
I am here for it.
Okay. So I'm going to be sharing the tale of Francisco Guerrero Pérez. My accent is terrible and my Spanish is not great either, but I'm going to do my fucking best.
Yeah.
He was born in 1840 to impoverished parents in like a mountainous kind of region or whatever of Mexico.
Okay.
And he had a bit of an absentee father. He had several siblings, and he had an abusive / neglectful mother, where there's even tales of like strangulation and things like that of the children, not killing them, but harming them and stuff like that. And when he's finally 22 years old, he heads to Mexico City, where he becomes a shoemaker. And I don't know if he was already, because of, his child and everything so affected, if he was already doing some of this dirt. But by the time he is in Mexico City, he has started to target. I mean, we're just jumping right in because there's so little about this, but like we get into it really quickly.
Okay.
He started to target women that are in the historical record perceived as sex workers. I'm going to say it's probably a mix of that and people who were just like minding their business, walking down the river and, stuff happened. Yeah. He ends up becoming known as El Estrangulador del Rio Consulado.
Is that the word for strangler in Spanish?
Yes.
El Estrangulador. I love it.
Estrangulador. He is the Consulado River Strangler in English. Okay. And from his time in Mexico City, he gets married. He starts having several kids. He is from his own perspective, a diehard Catholic. But he has some hardcore misogynist views on women's roles and things like that. And he literally believes any woman is responsible for the pleasure of a man at his request. And yet punish the women who do that to anybody that is not their husband.
Sure.
So there's essay for sure on his part, and things like that. And he's like a notorious cheater and stuff like that too. So everybody in his relative circle knows who he is, knows that he's out there cheating, knows that he's out there essaying people, and they just kind of leave it for what it is. He also likes to talk about it pretty openly. He doesn't seem to be very scared of it. And I don't know what prompts this, or if this is just the first documented or what have you. But in 1880, he starts killing women. So he's known for killing, and depends on what the resource is. And most of the resources is exclusively in Spanish. It was very difficult to find anything in English about this person. I literally found 2 articles and 1 podcast where the person being interviewed was the great grandson on the maternal side of him.
Oh wow.
And that was interesting because it was a question of like randomly in his life, some family member goes, "Hey, do you know that we're related to a serial killer?" Like what? So that thing was in, but it was very little in English. So there was a lot of Google Translate for me in this. So, hopefully I'm getting as much of it right as possible. But he had such strict views on female fidelity that I always wonder a person who has this mentality where they mistreat women, essay, all kinds of stuff, whatever, but somehow it's still the woman's responsibility that she was not faithful to who her partner was and everything like that. And because of that lack of faithfulness, they deserved punishment, which led to strangulation. And in some cases, even more brutal, cutting, dismembering, things like that, or whatever.
Yeah.
There's also a belief that he would continue to violate the bodies after the women were dead as well. But most of the people were just left on the side of the river or wherever he ended up doing the initial assault. Or would, like, take them to the river under the guy, like if they were sex workers, take them to the river under the guise of he's going to be a client, but then he would end up turning on them and things like that. So depending on the reports, it's either a dozen women or over 20 women. And then there's, of course, the ones that they just don't know if they're him or if they're somebody else or whatever. From 1880 to 1888, somewhere between that dozen to 20 women were killed by him. He would openly talk about this in the village. People knew he did this stuff, but they never turned him in because a lot of people were scared of him.
Okay, reasonable, yeah.
But also, like, if he's talking about it so openly in a village setting, I feel like eventually the police would have heard at some point, but they don't go after him. And who knows, like, we're probably talking about like a village sheriff type of role or something like that, because it is the 1880s and things. So who knows exactly how established it was. He ends up getting this nickname that translates either into this dude wears a lot of vests or this dude is, a Rolling Stone and he's out on these streets. Like, it literally has both translations.
Okay, I love
his
it.
nickname was El Chalequero.
Okay.
And so, like, it literally has those
brilliant.
two things. Like, he wore, and he liked to dress nice. Like, I think because he was so impoverished and things like that, once he became a shoemaker, of dressing nice or dressing at your station in life or slightly above your station was important to him.
Are we saying vest that in the UK would mean a waistcoat, right?
Okay.
Not like an underwear garment vest?
Okay, so for us, it's you would wear it under a suit jacket, and it's
okay, and it's got no sleeves.
So,
yes. Okay. So for us, that's called a waistcoat. And for us, a vest would be like an undershirt, what you put on under your, like close to your skin,
like a tank top or
yeah.
Okay,
and that's like a form of underwear. Okay,
so
that's why it's quite funny because I instantly went to, like, he likes to wear a lot of vests, like underwear.
You're like, dress nice. What are you talking about? Yeah, that's what I forgot. But yes, vests, and it's the same as like in Americans freak out when they hear British people talk about pants.
Oh yeah,
meaning undergarments, and pants for us
just mean trousers.
Yeah, like we do things differently.
Sorry. Okay, so he's got a lot of vests. He likes to look smart.
He likes to look smart. Exactly. He likes. So he has this nickname that literally has both translations, and it's one of those things that popped up in anything, whether I translated it from Google Translate or if it was in the English things, where it was like, it's either because he was known for wearing these waistcoats and vests, or it is because he was unfaithful.
Yeah. Okay.
It's so kind of goofy. So again, this is not 100% clear because the like documentation is so limited, and there's nothing online. Like in Europe, we can find from way far back like these very detailed court cases or articles and things like that. For Mexico, like, I can't even find a single original article.
Oh, okay.
Digitized in any way, shape, or form. There are places in Mexico where those exist and they can be visited and things like that, but not for whatever reason they're not online and things like that. And so when it did go wide in the media, it did actually, people heard about it in other countries because it was pretty significant. Okay. And near the end of his little reign there from 1880 to 1888, Jack the Ripper had emerged.
Okay.
So despite the fact that this fool was active 8 years prior to Jack the Ripper, he's known as the Mexican Jack the Ripper.
Okay.
So this was one of those subject matters that I was like, this is a Matcha Masala discussion, because how is the man that was doing it first?
Yeah.
And he was a bit more brutal about it. He wasn't as like meticulous and medical, I guess, about the way he did things. He was far more brutal, but he was active. So Jack the Ripper would be the English Francisco.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
The way he kind of gets caught, and again, this goes back to there's not that many things, is that somebody was walking alongside the river and saw him attacking somebody.
Okay.
And in doing so, finally did, like, you can't deny it now.
Okay, so you can walk around telling everyone you do these things, but until someone sees you doing it,
right? Until someone sees you do it. And during his trial, there were tales of women who had gotten away from him, and they did come forward to say how brutal the attacks were. In some cases, there was a cave he would leave people in, tied up. He would go back and revisit them sometimes. Sometimes they would get away. Sometimes that's where they would meet their end and stuff like that. And so he was arrested in 1888, and he was ultimately convicted because of the testimony by the women who survived primarily, and the witness who saw that last crime before he was arrested. No trial transcripts or anything like that could I find, but these were the things that were mentioned in, sort of the bullets of his story.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, there's women that got away, poor things.
Right, because now they still have to live with it. The other part is, like, you still exist in the same village of this person who did this stuff to him. You know who he is, and he could be just walking around.
Yeah.
So I imagine it's a like extra frightening of if he's ever going to come back, because he knows I know, kind of a thing.
Yeah.
So he ends up getting convicted in what it was supposed to be the death penalty, but this was sort of in kind of like a in name only type of thing, because they weren't actively necessarily doing the death penalty around that time. Like, they could or could not. It was just like, whatever happens.
Okay, sure. That's something you want to leave up to chance.
Yeah, but the judge, like, not the judge. So the judge of his court case was like, throw the books at you type of thing. We're going to get you the highest thing. Yeah. There was a governor or a mayor or somebody in politics who comes in a year later and ends up dismissing his case, saying he didn't deserve the death penalty. I don't think he really did things as harshly. I think the judge was too harsh for what he actually did. So he threw it out.
Whoa.
So Francisco gets out of prison.
No way.
He gets released. 1908.
Yeah.
He does it again.
He fucking does.
Yeah, I'm going to assume he was doing it, but they just didn't necessarily, because, like, how do you stop? I mean, I know there are people who stop, like the Golden State Killer went dormant for many, many years before he was finally caught as an old man. BTK went dormant for many years before he couldn't stand that people didn't know who he was, and then he started to, so like I guess I understand that there is in some way you might stop, or it might be too difficult to keep it going, or whatever. Blah blah blah.
There's definitely a psychology as well, too. That sometimes there are breaks and things happen.
Yeah, but speaking of psychology, is a lot of people in hindsight have like reviewed his tendencies, and even people at the time, because mental health studies were starting to become a thing at this time. He was considered and written about back in those days as having psychopathic tendencies, that he had a lack of empathy, he was manipulative and promiscuous, that he had extreme misogyny, and he basically saw women as disposable. And every time he committed his crime, he was hate driven. Like, there was hate involved. So the question was for psychologists at the time was he turning these women into his mother because of the kind of abuse he suffered at her hands from his childhood? And so he was transplanting her face to them so that he could commit these crimes. But then, because he was considered someone who had a bit of an Oedipal complex after he was imprisoned, that's when psychologists had access to him. Sure. So 1908, he gets caught for doing it again. Okay. And this time he does get in prison, and he ends up living the rest of his life in prison. He did get assigned the death penalty again.
Right.
This time it did stick, but he ended up just dying in prison, and
Okay.
and he was over the age of 70, because the last known photograph of him, which I do have photographs of, was when he was 70 years old in prison. And it's in that post 1908 period of time that he gets evaluated and things, and that's where, you know, they determine him to have an edible complex and definitely psychopathic tendencies.
Wow. Sure.
He would still say, like, to the end, that, like, this was the correct thing because he was a man.
Oh, cool. Okay, so he stuck to his guns on that one.
Yeah,
Wow.
he did. He also had a bit of a dapper reputation in prison too, because he insisted on being able to wear his nice clothes, maintaining his you know, vest and everything like that. And so rather than like other the clothing that other prisoners, which is usually like donated, hand me down, you know, type of things, he was able to like still dress. So like the photo of him that I have to share of him in 70 years old, still in prison, he's dressed
He's
to
looking
the
sharp. Okay.
yeah, he's looking smart. So it, like I said, it's a quick story.
Yeah.
But him being the first known, like on paper known serial killer of Mexico makes him significant.
Yeah.
The podcast that I did listen to, because I don't always listen to a podcast beforehand during the research, but in this case, because there was literally only one in English.
Yeah.
And believe me, I sat through YouTubes where I was like, okay, I know that word. Like I had Spanish subtitles and I'm like, okay. But it was just so hard to do it. But in this case, this is the only, and like literally nothing on YouTube in English about this man.
And because you don't tell me the stories, it's not even like I could come in and translate half of it.
Yeah, like I was like, so now,
eventually.
like, if you learn a little bit more from him, like my Spanish is very incomplete. And it wasn't that I wasn't picking up on things, but it was just that, like, you know, it's every fifth to seventh word, you know, it wasn't complete.
And especially when it's like a specific set of vocabulary that you probably haven't learned yet, you know.
Right.
Like,
I don't know a whole lot of murder-related Spanish.
How does one say asphyxiate in Spanish?
Yeah, like, and I was sitting here, like, especially when I was learning the nickname for the crime part, the estrangulador, I was like, no. But yes, you know,
but yes,
I guess.
I mean, it's brilliant. I kind of love it.
My favorite is the thing on TikTok where people are like, you're not pronouncing this word right, or this word right, and stuff, like the croissant, you know.
Oh yeah,
it's croissant, you know. And so people are getting on TikTok and being like, I have an American accent. It would be weird if I say I want a croissant, you know, like, you know, and they're still doing their like fake version of a French accent. And it's like, but what doesn't sound weird with my American accent is I would like a croissant, you know. I say croissant, but I don't, you know, I don't get that throat sound in it.
Yeah, I think we wouldn't say croissant, but we would say croissant, like a little bit.
Yeah, you just you get the little bit of it, but
not
go full.
But it is hard. I mean, especially with people with mixed backgrounds. You know, if you've got different languages in your heritage, like you know, that's even when we do this show, right? And matcha and masala, right? Matcha and masala is not how you say those words. Like, you know, so. There are times when I'll just go masala because that's it. Look, that's how it sounds in English, which is really sort of doesn't sound beautiful or interesting at all. And there are times when I do it and I'm all like matcha and masala, and I like do it.
Masala. Yeah, I've heard you do that a couple of times.
Because sometimes it's just such a weird thing because I am speaking English and I know that word, to be used in English, but also obviously know it like when we speak Punjabi. So it's really difficult. Like one of the things when my family came to the UK, they're from India. There wasn't a huge community at the time, for example. And so there's a lot of words that my family do say the anglicized version of. And for example, because like my family is religious, the religion is Sikhism. And so if you speak to an Indian person, the way to pronounce that word is Sikh. But if you speak in English, people will say Sikh. Right.
Because if you said that, they wouldn't know what you're saying was.
Yeah, but the way to pronounce it is Sikh. That's like how you pronounce it. But but it's just really funny because even people in my family, we would just say, oh, I'm Sikh because we're speaking English to English people. We came here where there weren't English, other people who would understand us. And so that's just, you kind of make yourself understood. So you're not too precious about it at that point. And now we've come to a point, like further generations down the line, where we're integrated and all this, and we want to kind of reclaim that actually, no, hold on, like there are ways to say this. And it's a bit like people pronouncing your name, and it's like, you can say this word, like it's not that difficult for you. If you can say Arnold Schwarzenegger, you can say my name or whatever it is,
I swear I've had different times where I've been hardcore about it, because like if I can pronounce it in Japanese way, I would say it that way usually, because that's how we would say it at home. And if someone else would say something like simple things like the cartoon that people love, that I'm born in the wrong time to accept it, but I guess they say Naruto, whatever that one is. Naruto is how I would say it.
Okay.
But they would say Naruto, and then I would sit there and like cringe because I'm not hearing it the correct way. So like I understand the irritation. The funny thing is sometimes it's people who aren't even from that culture, language, or whatever that gets
who then are really hardcore about how to say it properly.
It's like I'm not gonna, I'm probably not gonna be able to do that. That being said, if like
an hotel,
like hotel, or hospital, like especially those of us who have multiple languages, even if we're not fluent in any of them, what we tend to do is if we know it, we incorporate it, and if we don't, we don't. And so, like, or even the pronunciation that's different between British English and American English. Like for me, I would say the like matcha instead of matcha. Where I would hear the British way say matcha. And I've heard, or like taco is how I would say it in English. Well, English, Spanish, whatever. But like on Great British Bake Off, they kept saying tacos on the one day that they decided to go Mexican on their thing. And the giggle, I couldn't contain my giggles because it sounded so ridiculous, because I'm like, you've definitely heard people say taco before. But again, it's one of those things of like, you say it the way your language or your dialect dictates how things are said.
And I think as we know, being mixed is a whole journey of ups and downs and backs and forths of like, I'm going hard on this element this year, in my 16th year.
Sometimes,
I'm gonna nail this part of it.
My pronunciation is gonna get better. It's gonna be
exactly. And language and pronunciation is definitely one of the aspects of that. That peaks and troughs. We'll go hard for it sometimes. Sometimes
I had a doctor at the house, and he had said like, your Spanish is getting better, but because he could speak English, we spoke mostly in English and stuff like that. And he said like, sometimes your pronunciation is good and sometimes it just sounds like you don't have enough practice or whatever. And then he asked me, he's like, do you speak any other languages? And I was like, I literally speak not enough of every language. Like I speak a little bit of Japanese, a little bit of French, a little bit of Arabic. My dad was born in Germany, so he always laced German into, even though he didn't live there for long, like he always laced German in. So I know a little bit of a whole bunch of languages. Not enough of any one except for English. And so this for some reason just sent my doctor cracking up, like that he just thought it was hilarious that like I would have so many different languages. And I was like, I don't know why it's funny, but like I've had, like, when I was younger, I had an Indian best friend. When I was older, I had an Arabic best friend, like I had a Mexican, stuff like that. So like I've picked up things from being in their families, and that's it. Like that's the way that I end up speaking. But it's, it was tough, like in trying to research this story too. I'm sitting here actively trying to like type it in to pronounce it correctly so that I don't just like American butcher it, or like make no effort, right?
That's the thing, I think. And I would always feel, if I feel like someone's trying, or if they if they ask, especially with names and stuff like that, if somebody says to you, oh, please can you pronounce your name because I don't want to get it wrong, like that's brilliant, because then just ask and hear it, and then at least if you try, and then even if you still get it wrong, it's fine then, because you've tried and you've listened and you've done your best. But just these, well, we know exactly the kind of people we're talking about, who just go home.
The people who would call the active serial killer of sex workers 8 years before Jack the Ripper the Mexican Jack the Ripper.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean, fucking hell.
Yeah.
So did you know there's been some news on the Jack the Ripper case?
I have seen a few things popping up.
Yeah, so basically they made public the case file. So it's 136 years old. It's the original case files from the detective who worked the case, and his relatives have released his files, which is kind of unbelievable because there's I'll try and get some pictures and we can pop them in because there's letters, statements, photographs, details of the people that they suspected and ruled out. There was one guy who was Russian who they were convinced was Jack the Ripper, but it turns out he was actually in prison in France at the time of all the killings. So it's but for quite a long time they held this guy. So just because I couldn't help but feel some foreign Russian dude that they were like, it's definitely him, right? And they've even got like a mugshot of him and stuff. And I just anyway, wrong place, wrong time. But at least he was in prison for something else. So
I guess, jeez.
But
that being your alibi must.
It wasn't me, honest, Gov. I was already doing.
I did other shit.
Else. Oh, the murders! No. I just did extortion and robbery.
That's like Tilly, right? Because the story she kept saying in court, I ain't no thief. In her broken English and stuff like that. Like, we're talking about murder. We're not worried about that. Just make sure everybody knows I am not a thief.
Exactly. But I hate this. This is such a Western need, though, isn't it? Because I find it really interesting that this is a peer of Jack the Ripper, as in, we're talking about the same time period,
like contemporary,
and that helps me to, place it in time and think about what was going on and think about the wider world and stuff. And I find that's useful to me in that way. But I hate this Western mentality of, instead of thinking, oh, that's useful and what can I infer from that, and thinking your way through it, the Western mentality that just says, oh, we've got one of those, is a Mexican one of those, right? Been
hey
there,
dummy, you're not going to understand the story unless I name it something you've heard of before.
Exactly.
Mexican Jack the Ripper.
And then we're just, and I don't mean to stick up for him. However, let's give him his individual credit for his evil deeds, right? Let's not
credit where credit's due. He was there first.
Right, exactly.
When you're really caping for like let the brown people be serial killers too thing, because there's other podcasts that are like this where they focus specifically on people of color murderers, because and one of the shows, literally their tagline is not all serial killers are white men. Fair. It's true. I mean, if anybody's going to be overly famous for it, let it be the white men. Okay, fine. But this is the first documented dude. And okay, most of the people in this area at this time would be considered like mestizo, so born there, but a mix of indigenous and Spanish and European stuff like that. And so there would be the potential for them to be viewed as white Mexican versus more indigenous and things like that. So sure, that could be into play anyway. But where Mexican people are concerned, or any South American, Central American person is concerned, there's a granted brownness from other Westerners where they don't account for the racial divides that happen in literally since I've been in Mexico, it has been we don't worry about race. Well, actually you do, but you do it through colorism instead. You say it's not about race, but that brown indigenous person who's very clearly holding on to his indigeneity is somehow a lesser person, citizen, what have you, compared to the blonde, blue-eyed, white-skinned newscasters that we see all the time here and stuff like that. So yes, it is about race. It's just that white Westerners can't see race in brown spaces and in what they're perceiving as predominantly brown spaces.
Yeah, because I'm sorry to say this, but because it's just fucking blanket ignorance. Browns. Just a load of browns, different shades, whatever. Don't care.
Browns.
Put you in one, lump you all together. It doesn't matter that black people can be from Africa or the Caribbean or from Europe. They don't have to. They can be from everywhere. you just assume so much and just go, oh, you're one of them, put it, label, box, right? I know what I've got my judgment based on what I think you are. And then I slap that on you and I move on because I don't care. And I just, want to put you in a box.
Something that's different for like Black Americans versus I think Black people that are in other Western countries, like in England, Black people are accepted from my knowledge of it, of like if they know what country they're from. So like if their family did immigrate from Nigeria or whatever and stuff like that, or if they're Caribbean, people understand that divide in the UK of the different kind, and I'm doing quotation fingers for the people who are only listening, the different kind of Black people.
And there's a lot of like national pride of people that I'm from Ghana, like we're from Nigeria. We're from Jamaica, definitely.
And whereas in the United States, if you're Black, you're Black. And so you'll find people that are here that are Haitian or Caribbean, and people call them Black and they say, well, I'm not Black. But they're specifically meaning what you think of as Black in terms of, being a descendant of the transatlantic slave trade, and you've been generationally here. So now a different ethnicity. Compared to wherever in Africa we were stolen from. A Haitian person is not going to be a Black American in the way that, those of us that have been there, have been. And but even Black people are guilty of doing this.
I've heard so many times people like Americans will call Black people in Britain African American.
Because what do you call your African Americans?
African American. But like, okay, I had never been to Africa or America, and I was born here, and my dad's from Barbados. Like, what are you talking about? How am I any of that? Like, well, that's not a label that I can associate with. What are you talking?
It's really funny. I mean, there is like on the American Office, which I don't particularly love compared to the original, but there is a time where the Michael character is in Canada, and he asks, what do you call your African Americans here? And I was like, that is so important that they said that on that show, because that's exactly how Americans think. I've seen
but when I've seen American people actually just call British Black people African American, they don't even think, what do you call African Americans? They just think that's
what they are. And I don't use African American. I've never gone by it. It kind of took popularity when I was a young teenager, so like 13, 14 was the time period that it was becoming. And then by the time I was 15, it was sort of like there was a divide, those of us who called ourselves Black and those of us who called ourselves African American. And the reason why I've never called myself African American or mixed African American is that I didn't know where in Africa we came from. All I knew was how far I could trace, and how far I could trace was to Galveston ports in Texas. So where I descend from are the first people who celebrated the Juneteenth holiday, which was 2 years after emancipation, when Texas finally learned, hey, you guys are free. So 2.5 whole years later, those are my ancestors, because those are the people that I can trace back to. I can't trace any further back except for through DNA test that says Gabon, or what is now Gabon. So I felt like not having that bridge to Africa eliminated it, because our family could have been here 400 years, or they could have been here 200 years, or they could have been here, I don't know how long, but I know that at least in the amount of generations I could trace back to, we were from the Galveston. That's where we hit land, right? And that doesn't account for like the other ancestors I have that were in different parts of the country and stuff like that. Just the ones that I could trace. So for me, like, I'll tell people that, like, I'm California Black by way of Texas, because my people came from Texas and then went to California. And to be California Black in the United States is very specific. So if I say that to American Black people, they're going to understand
they get it,
the difference compared to being a Southerner or something like that. So I think it makes more sense for me to describe myself as Black or mixed Black in that way, because I'm not retaining any culture from where we were stolen from. Whereas people from the Caribbean, okay, they also don't retain any culture from Africa, except what has become a part of their culture too, that they identify as a Caribbean thing, but actually maybe originates in Africa. We do it, the Americans do it too. There's just shit we didn't know came from Africa. We just happen to still do it. And I think Caribbeans also have that going on as well. Whereas like if you're in the UK or you're here in the United States or in the United States and you're from Nigeria because your mom's from Nigeria, or you're from Senegal or something like that, then you're Senegalese, you're Nigerian or something like that, and that's fine to maintain. But here,
but I think this is another one of those things where, just in the same way we've said, ask someone, how do I pronounce your name, or then listen to the words people use to identify themselves, because the fact that you're saying, I don't describe myself as African American, because people need to listen to that, because why should somebody just label you that because that's just what they've learned? And okay, maybe at some point they've decided that was the politically correct thing to say, and they say it because they think they're being polite or non-offensive or whatever,
or non-racist.
Right. But then what you haven't understood is that non-white people are not a monolith, and within that, none of the subgroups are either. We get to identify individually as humans however we want to. So listen to how we describe ourselves, or ask in a nice way if it were necessary, and then act accordingly. It's not that difficult, right? Because you can't just blanket label everyone,
right? And there's so much of our identities that are this way. There's race version of it. There's the gender version of it. There's the sexuality version of it. Like there's literally all kinds of ways of just like, listen to me and let me tell you how I identify. And that's how you can go forward. And I have been like corrected in quotation fingers again about going by Black versus African American. I've been corrected by people who have a very staunch African American identity. I've also been corrected by white people who want to feel more comfortable, and so they'll say that, and then I'll say like, you'll never understand why it's important distinction between those of us who consider ourselves Black and those of us who consider ourselves African American. If someone goes by it, I use it for them. Just like a pronoun, it's not hard. And it's not political to identifying people in the way that they wish to be identified, or in the way that I don't want to say wish, but like literally do identify themselves. It's not political to give, to say what they tell you to say. What exactly is political is not intentionally not identifying people the way that they identify. And I literally just talked about this or posted about this on a TikTok response yesterday, because it came up where it's like, it's not hard. Like you said, it's not hard. So in this case, I think like him being referred to as the Mexican Jack the Ripper, again, what are we doing? We're centralizing whiteness. We're centralizing that England and Europe is basically the center of the earth, and everything else is a version, a diluted version, however far out we are from
God, can't you just imagine the awful like tabloid writings that you'd get this even today? And this is offensive, I'm going to say it, right? You can just imagine some awful white guy writing Jose the Ripper, or like trying to put some
like trying to
sounding name to try, and that's just hideous to me. And that's what this feels like. Calling him the Mexican Jack the Ripper feels like that. And you're right to center yourself. I was like, brown people could be serial killers too. God
imagine how crazy it is that you're so used to being the center that you need to actually even claim the serial murder of people. So I mean,
really
that's pretty much
this guy, though. What I found really interesting is this way that he feels towards women. And I know you said he was staunchly Catholic, and obviously there's a lot rolled up in Catholicism with the role of women and original sin and Eve, and a lot of religions and cultures have an Eve version of the story where the woman fucks it up for everyone, right? That's pretty much widespread in every continent, that some group somewhere has got the story where the woman fucks it up for everyone. But this idea that women, it's they're both a whore and a saint and a mother and a prostitute, and these things that all exist in one, and ultimately the result of that, the net result, is that it's their fucking fault, and they've got to be punished, and they've got to be made property, and it's your job to decide to judge that. These men who have, and obviously you're saying he's got these complicated feelings with his mother. And I feel so sorry for these women who it must have been terrifying, like you say, the ones who got away and potentially had to worry about him coming back, to finish
Yeah.
them off, because they could identify him. And the fact that
And
he just died in prison, that doesn't feel satisfactory, because
right,
I mean, I don't believe in the death penalty. Sorry, I'm not saying they should have killed him, but I just mean the fact that he got to live out his life in prison with his smart clothes.
with his smart clothes, right? Like, because he
doesn't
got a
feel
benefit.
super punishy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a strange thing to be, and I mean, I struggle with what I think would be and like apt punishment for certain things. Like
Yeah.
there is a part of me who doesn't necessarily think like death by state necessarily, but like that the family should be able to do it, like, or something like that, like there's a version of me that does think like
Retribution.
like I have a little bit of that in me, and it depends on what it is, right? Like when it comes to anything happening to a child, I'm usually like death on all costs, like, and it's not like it's necessarily death by state, but there's just
doesn't it take us back to like way back to Fulan, right? So she is the victim of all these crimes, and then the fact that she goes and kicks ass and takes revenge, like we kind of
vibe with it.
that,
Like I think there is a version of retribution that isn't necessarily completely not okay, if I'm honest. I don't necessarily think that the state is the best for that because of how it happens, I guess, the long way, the inhumane environments and things like that. But then you hear, like, I do believe this stuff, but then you hear something like he got to wear his suits despite
like
exactly the governor or whatever and asked for this permission and was granted it. And like I mean that was one little way to be, make him feel human, and maybe that was a good thing or something like that. But given that like you killed potentially 20 plus people in a very, very brutal way, and then have the audacity to ask for comfort in your punishment.
Yeah, exactly.
I feel very complicated feelings about
me too. Yeah, I've got a lot of thoughts about that.
Like I want to
because that almost feels close to some, like, because I agree with that, right? But then that almost feels close to an opinion which I don't hold, which is in modern terms when people talk about TV in prison, or and I'm just like, but they're still humans, and this is I can't abide this idea that, especially because the prison systems that we have and the reasons why people are in prison are bullshit, and and I don't agree with that, and I don't believe they should be stripped of humanity,
right?
And so that there are basic things which I feel are important. And I do, and I will uphold that and disagree with the prison systems about that. But at the same time, I don't think it's right that he got to wear his waistcoat.
Of it, right? Like, I mean, I like the ideas where there's education systems that are active and working, like restorative justice type things. I absolutely feel like that kind of stuff should happen. I don't think they should be stripped of every creature comfort necessarily, because like as humans, we do need things like that. But at the same time, there is where you'd think that the person isn't learning anything and then they get a benefit. I think that's where maybe my line is suffering, because at no point do I think that Francisco was feeling like he was necessarily in the wrong. And so even the letter he writes to the governor, the line that I remember hearing about was something like, I believe that I should be able to dress appropriate to my station.
Ooh.
Which is like, to me translating into, like, I get that you got me in jail for this shit or whatever, but like, I'm still.
And so there's no hint of remorse there,
That's what I would, And
so then you have to question, what do you want the prison system to be? Is it rehabilitation, and trying to convince people to not do crimes anymore? And help them to adjust and find a way out of doing crimes,
right?
Or is it just somewhere to lock them up, throw away the key, and just be brutal? And you have to it depends what you want out of your prison system.
I think the problem with the prison system in general is that it's ham-fisted. There's
Yeah,
one
yeah,
punishment
sure.
for all these different things.
Yeah.
Whereas, in Francisco's case, I think absolutely there's, because of his psychopathic tendencies, there's a different level, like rehabilitation might not be
Yes.
the
Yeah.
way for him,
Yeah.
but there might be some other use
Yeah.
or thing where he could be.
And you think it's back in the day, how much was written and known about psychopaths and stuff, and you can
Yeah.
imagine how interesting it would be to be the psychologist that gets to like interview him and study his brain and try and use that as a basis for what will then become profiling, I guess.
Right. Yeah.
That's super fascinating.
It's funny because that made me think of the detective in the Jack the Ripper case, because he was the same man that ended up being the detective in the Dr. Crippen case. And this is years and years later, right? And for him, he had a bit of a I need to prove myself. Like, I think that's why he was so hell-bent on getting Crippen once he realized Crippen was the dude. And I think there's like maybe some profiling and things like that going on, but it was mostly, like what they kind of basically Crippen's weird, stupid moves that he made, that made all this happen. But he was hell bent on making this conviction because he missed out on Jack the Ripper. And so you think about like not just the psychology surrounding the criminals and what we do with them once we pick, but also like the people who are responsible for convicting people change because of their successes and failures.
Definitely.
Well,
that goes back to the story that I was telling. Do you remember in our Christmas episode when we did our double and I took you to Liverpool, and it turned out that the whole one guy came in who was a senior detective who had bungled the other case and was determined to prove himself, and just came in and waded in with some absolutely outrageous theory, and really went hard pushing that.
The Polynesian death cult.
There was no fucking evidence for it, but it was all because of his experience where he'd fucked up in the past and was determined to nail a really good case to kind of save his reputation. Well, he failed. So, it turns out it probably wasn't the Tiki death cult.
Probably not.
But, maybe this is, I mean, I don't mean to be generalize about this, but this field, it's a very male dominated field, especially in these times, back in the day, and you can't help but feel it's like the male pride, the ego's been hurt, and then there's a revenge element in that, isn't there, when they get their next case. So it definitely affects how they conduct themselves. No, this was a fascinating one, because even though it's a short story, there's just so much to talk about. I mean, we could go on.
Right. Well, like I was thinking about it when I was doing the research, and almost considering not doing it because of how little I could find. But it's still being significant because like literally it's the first documented serial killer in Mexico. So that has there is a story to tell, even if you can't tell the whole story. I feel that what was important about it was the difference in how culturally I don't know if this is the right word for it, but like values the information. Because like last week you literally just talked about something that happened in what, the 1500s, 1600s. And they had the trial like the testimony, like so much information. And maybe this is why the European Western world does think of themselves as better, because they've had all this kind of stuff. But culturally, I don't know why there isn't as much information, or maybe there is, but they're just better at keeping it under wraps and not making it public to the outside world and stuff like that. And I don't understand the culture behind why that would be the case. And I would like, that's kind of what I think you and I talk about, wanting to know. And at least in this, being able to talk about this, a case like this, we can show like this stuff is not all cut and dry. The way we're going to talk about a European 16th century or whatever werewolf murder is not necessarily going to be the way we talk about a 19th century serial killing situation. Like it's just not going to be the same every time. And as much as the law or punishment likes to be very black and white, we're not going to have the same type of information. And it's also interesting how and why it is the way that it is.
Yeah,
With the
definitely.
great grandson, I think double great grandson of Francisco, he was on the Perez side. He was saying things like, in learning about Francisco, he actually could identify a lot of the same personality traits. The difference was that he didn't cross into violent, like he didn't have the violent tendencies.
Yeah.
But he said he understood why his family kept it a secret, because how now he has to live with being like, oh shit, I do that kind of stuff too. And he didn't go into detail about what those things were, which was weird, because if all I'm hearing about this person is misogyny and fidelity of women and this and that or whatever, and then I hear a descendant saying, I have a lot of the same personality traits, but doesn't go into now I got all kinds of questions about this grandson because great grandson, because he's walking around, so it's this is why I think it's important for us to know about the past, because maybe we should keep an eye on this situation. I don't know, if you have an ancestor that does a certain thing, maybe
just keep an eye on that one. Yeah, I think.
That's why like the active descendants of the Hitler family have all like gotten vasectomies and things like that, because they don't want to pass on his
Hitler
line.
genes. Oh my god!
Which I also think is fucking amazing that is a thing.
Yeah,
that they like collectively decided to end their bloodline.
Yeah. Wow. Well, and
on that note, don't forget to follow us.
I just had literally nothing to come back with to that. I was just like, wow, that's
right?
heavy. I've got nothing.
It's so funny.
That's why it's fun doing this job, because we do go around the houses from mermaids to forced sterilization of Hitler's descendants.
You know what I'm saying? Like, there's so much knowledge to be had on Matcha, Masala, and murder.
Yeah. Every day is a school day. So thank you for telling us this tale. And when we next record, you will be back in the States. So this was a farewell to Mexico story. And the next time we see each other, that's where you'll be. And so nothing will change for, listeners, viewers. It will all be the same. You'll have a different background, but that's okay. We'll roll with it.
There will also be 2 cats that might possibly pop up in my thing. Yay! Because I'm only going to be in a room, and we haven't introduced the cats to the rest of the household because they've never been around dogs before. So you might get some cat tails or just walking past the camera and stuff going forward.
Okay, so thank you so much. We'll wrap it up there, shall we?
Yeah, well, real fast, don't forget to follow us on the social medias, Matcha, Masala, Murder on TikTok, Instagram, and of course, YouTube. And if you're listening to us audio only, we just recommend Spotify because it does help us in the long run. Yes, but you can catch us on all the podcatchers. And then there is also the buymeacoffee.com/Matcha, Masala, and Murder, where you get more information about the crimes that we discuss. And you can also support us by buying us a cup of tea.
Yes,
and remember,
please.
There's 2 of us, so buy a bowl of cup of tea. It's
kind of difficult to share a cup of tea, over an ocean.
Especially across the pond, it's a bit of a commute to top half, bottom half.
We did have a little gap in air dates, previously. And so if you go on the Buy Me a Coffee, you can actually access all the previous writings that are on there. So all the sort of newsletters, and it's the written account of all the stories that we tell here. And then there's bonus contents, and there will be bonus content there by the time you listen to this from our little gap, because even though we weren't on air, we still wanted to give you a little something. So
there's always crimes to be told about.
Exactly. So go and get your chops around that. Some history, some crimes. That's where we live. Okay. So thank you so much.
Thank you. And I guess I'll see you when I'm in a different country.
And I'll just still be here.
Matcha and Masala is produced and hosted by Sharmane Fury and Rhia.
This is a Main Hustle Media production in association with Virtual Reality Studios. All stories are researched to the best of our ability with information freely available to the public.
This podcast is intended for entertainment purposes, and due to the nature of true life crimes, some information remains inaccessible and new information can come to light after recording.